Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast. This will be episode number 7. This is part 2 of healing the wounded warrior, trauma and the sacred masculine. And last week we kind of unpacked some of the aspects of the actual issues, the traumas that men face in this modern Western world, and such as circumcision, spanking, war, suppression of emotions, and depicting that as weakness and things like that. So this week we're kind of going to look at the other side, where we get into some of the solutions and what can we do about this. Obviously we always want to be able to look at problems, but then give you actionable knowledge as well, because it's really easy to point out what's wrong with things, but then again, through natural law and the apophatic learning process, you not only have to know what not to do, but what to do instead. So we're going to try to unpack that a little bit tonight and get into some of that. So I guess, Brian, would you like to take off with with some of the anger that can be manifested from this state?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I know this is, something that, I felt in my personal experience, and I'm sure you both can probably relate to as well, is that, especially as you get older and you start to become aware of some of these traumas that happen, like circumcision, or going back and thinking about the things like might have been normalized, you can see that a lot of anger might potentially come up. And hold on, wait for my internet connection here. Okay, I think my connection's good again. But so sorry, just making sure. But you can see that a lot of anger, even some rage, you could say, could come up. Because, it makes you feel that, like, as a young child, the people who were supposed to protect you the most not only did they not protect you, but they actually helped participate in that trauma, and then I know, especially as a young man, I felt a huge amount of rage and anger. That was the whole reason I, went into the infantry and the Marine Corps, because that I was looking for a place to express that. And I was so angry, and I just didn't know why. And it's only after, years, over a decade later of, unpacking all of this and working through that stuff, that I started to identify some of these very traumatic events and situations that happen that, were never processed. So then they became suppressed and put into the unconscious. And then they became, this giant ball of rage that was controlling me. And it felt so powerful. And I just couldn't understand why. So I think, the first step of recognizing that we feel this way, and then is the first important point to observe it. But then we can get into, like, how do we look at, processing this and looking, forgiving, our parents, and, letting go of some of this anger, working through these things. So you guys want to get into that?
I actually have something right off the top of my head here. Mm-hmm. So this idea
Awesome.
of anger and this concept comes to mind of, this feedback loop in your head saying, what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. And it's actually kind of a half truth. There's nothing wrong with you in that your emotions are working exactly as they're supposed to work, but they're indicating that there's a problem. So it's like you've got a flat tire sensor telling you you've got low air. Well, there's nothing wrong with you in the sense that, the sensor is actually working correctly. It's indicating that there's an issue. So it's not the emotions that's what's wrong with you. The emotions are a pointer to a deeper issue that needs correction, that needs, work and healing. So, that's something that came to me there, is because there's, especially as a man who's told, to not feel your feelings and just to be totally logical, and, your feelings don't matter or whatever, is that they're going to happen anyway. And so you don't really know how to properly deal with them or relate to them, interact with them, understand them, and
Yeah.
ultimately love them, because they're, they're a part of you. And if
Yeah.
that's creating that dissension between yourself, where you're separating yourself from your emotions and saying that's bad, instead of like rectifying and reconciling it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of that, especially with the parents having such a huge influence on you at a young age, and growing up in the Western culture, you're having to meet a standard that they are setting for you. That's, obviously westernized in the sense that, you got to get a job, you got to get married at a certain age, you have to take on certain responsibilities at a certain age. And then when you don't meet those standards, you feel like a failure. You feel like you're not meeting, some type of imaginary, arbitrary benchmark that may be completely arbitrary, like I said, but it's still embedded in the culture, and you feel as though you have to abide by it, in that key term culture, be in that cult of just complete, almost like just an adherence or a try to align yourself with this arbitrary expectation. And and that puts the pressure on the male, because when the hero feels like the failure, that puts a complete damper on his progress, as an individual,
Right.
from the get-go.
Yeah, I think that's great points. And what this is bringing up for me here is that, as we talked about in the first episode, one of the things they're trying to do with all this is to connect us, not only disempower our sacred masculine, but that's done through disconnecting us with the sacred feminine. So I think obviously a solution is getting back in touch with this, because these emotions and things that have been suppressed, that we haven't been feeling, we're disconnected from them. So learning to really tap into that properly, learning how to express properly, having a tribe of brothers, that you can go to and speak about with things, and that they can help hold you accountable, especially having, a group of brothers that understand cosmic law. I think that those are all really big steps, and I think really necessary steps to allow us to process this, because trying to do it all on your own, it's not only a very lonely journey, but it's very hard, very difficult. So I think, not only trying to do this, but to find others that can help you do that, whether the not only brothers, but other, teachers, whoever it may be, to help you to start to connect to this process, because we need to have people help us, to help teach us and guide us when we haven't really ever had that as a child, because trying to figure it out all through the apophatic process can be sometimes, take us a lot longer than if we were to just have had someone that could have, given us the right advice when we needed it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's you can balance the two. You have to start somewhere. So simply accepting that you have feelings of rage, depression, things like that is a good place to start. Is simply not resisting those. Accepting that they are there to kind of steer you in the direction that you need to be going for, moving forward with that. But then also, I think it's really important to get in touch with yourself. So Greg, you were talking about, feeling like a failure because of all these imposed expectations. So not only are you putting shame and guilt and all those negative feelings on top of the the rage and all that you're already feeling,
Right.
self-imposed there, but then you're also connecting that with disappointment, because I think a lot of this comes back to fear of like disappointment and rejection from our parents, who we first learn how to love and relate to others from. So by not living up to their standards and being afraid to do what you truly want to do for fear of them saying, this isn't what we want for you, or this is a bad path, or like some kind of like, we're disappointed in you, because that you ultimately have to discover what is your orlog, which, you know, your
Mhm.
dharma, your life's purpose. There is a reason why each of us are here. Every single individual that comes into
Absolutely.
existence in this physical plane chose to come here with a specific mission to accomplish in this life.
Mhm.
And you're going to keep repeating until you get it. So you might as well get it. Like,
Mhm.
you're just,
Right.
you know, you're wasting time if you're not trying to actively seek out what that is. And then, and the only way to do that is to truly go within and connect with your true self. It's not out there. It's not of anyone else's expectations, because no one can ever know you like you do. So
Mhm.
that, you know, the balance there.
Mhm.
Yeah, and when you eventually come to that progression in your life, when you finally accept yourself, and you know you have a purpose and a direction, and that sort of divine order, you know, that you understand, and you know you're heading in the right direction, and you're trusting it, and you have an open heart with it. That's where the magic starts to happen, because you have to be almost, you know, completely self-aware at that point, and completely on the you know the path to that divinity within, to the point where you know exactly, you know, what direction you're heading in, because there could be zigzags and speed bumps, but if you know how to grow from those speed bumps, having learned them from you know, other failures in your life, and this goes back to, you know, people that have led charmed lives and haven't failed, and haven't had to experience any type of uphill battle, then you don't have that toolbox. The toolbox was there, but it was never utilized properly because you weren't taught how to utilize it.
Right.
Then, you know, that's when, you know, you're stuck and stagnant, because, you know, it wasn't taught to you on an early, you know, early in your life. So.
No, I think that that's bringing up for me is how important it is to not only, when we recognize that these happen, but to not stay stuck in a victimhood mindset, because that can be very easy. You know, I know even for myself that, oh, this happened to me. I was a little child. There was nothing, you know, like all these things. It's very easy to get stuck in that victimhood mindset. But when you can step back and look at it from an empowered place, that you know, are a divine soul, that you wanted to set up challenges for yourself so you can learn, you know, and help walk that dharma, you know, walk that orlog. We can start to look at these experiences, no matter how painful they may be, as important lessons, because, you know, from a magical perspective, everything does provide a charge. So if there's something there that has a strong emotional charge, that's something that you can get a lot of work done with. Not necessarily maybe easy, you know, maybe very challenging, but the potential is absolutely there.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say it's I think what sort of catapults you into that mindset is sort of having some type of almost like there's an end goal somewhere, but you know that to get there you have to understand where your strengths, where your weaknesses are. So
Right.
you're almost at a place, you know, and this is why most men are very almost confused in their 20s, because this is when you're getting out of the control system in school, and now you got to go out and meet that expectation, but you haven't really delved into any of the esoteric knowledge. You haven't delved into anything, you know, and in most cases a lot of men haven't, so they're in a deficit, an emotional deficit, and you know, a knowledge deficit. So
Right.
So now they have to now they have to play catch up, and that in itself can be you know, depression. I mean, that itself can cause depression, because
Right.
when you first learned about it, it's breaking up all of these thoughts that you had, and now all your beliefs are being challenged, and that could be detrimental to somebody's psyche, because you're unpacking all of this stuff that you were was hammered into you for so long as a male.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I think that can have a huge impact.
So
Yeah.
actually studying psychology for yourself is very empowering, because then that gives you the tools to actually process what happened to you and some of the unconscious behaviors that you've been using to sort of cope, so to speak, as a temporary thing. But then as your knowledge becomes more conscious, your behavior can become more conscious as well, and then you start recognizing those patterns and going like, oh, I see what's going on here. And then from there, you're actually in a place of empowerment to start shifting your mindset, shifting how you're relating to those thoughts and emotions again. And this other aspect too, that was a really big sort of revelation for me when I was first really like experiencing this massive shift into more true, authentic self-love. That happened to me, almost exactly a year ago. It's funny because I just had one of my a little like talk. I did a live chat on the beach, like exactly a year ago, came up a couple days ago, where I was literally just kind of processing this stuff out loud. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, and what it was really coming up was that that it's like the difference between being cocky and being confident is your experience. Any fool can think, oh yeah, if it was me in that situation, I'd blah 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 blah, because they're just talking out of their ass. They have no frame of reference. But when you actually go out, you're not afraid to fuck up. You're not afraid to learn, to fall on your ass, and actually toughen yourself through those experiences. That's what's going to cultivate true confidence and self-love, because it's not a belief anymore. It's a knowing. That's the difference between belief and knowing as well. You can beliefs are fickle, and you're setting yourself up. If you just believe, well, I need to believe that I love myself because that's the thing to do, and that's what all the gurus are telling me I should do. Then every little challenge, your foundation is weak, and it's going to totally mess you up. So you have to be not afraid to like actually put yourself out there and gain the experiences that are going to test yourself. It's like Tyler Durden says, how can you know about yourself if you've never been in a fight? Or he says, how much can you know about yourself if you've never been in a fight? Basically, like there's a lot of truth to that. Like you've got to know what you're made of.
Right. Yeah, I think a big thing this is bringing up for me here, and this was a huge tool for me personally, was the role of plant teachers for the purpose of cracking the shell. So let me state here that, I am definitely, and Logan's familiar with my stance on this here, but I think plant teachers can be very useful, but I think they're, especially in our Western society, they're definitely over-recommended and overused. They're not a fix-all thing. They're something that's supposed to be used to crack your shell open, and there needs to be a need for that to happen. For me personally, I was so emotionally disconnected from everything else that I needed something like that. And whenever I first used them, I got one of the most beautiful lessons I've ever had, that still to this day I found is part of cosmic law, and it's that everything is the same in a different way. And that was like the first time I saw that I was connected to everything else. And it just cracked me in such a way that I literally repeated that phrase over and over again all night, because it just kept hitting me on deeper and deeper levels.
Beautiful.
But you're supposed to take those lessons and then actually go and integrate them. You're supposed to journey there and get what you need to, and then bring it back. It's not, they're not a magic pill. But I think when they're used in the proper context, they can be extremely useful, and especially for some men, because that you been that disconnected from your emotions and your trauma, and just feeling that something like that gives you, kind of kicks you in the ass like you need, that can be very helpful.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because I had a sort of a similar experience that you had, like a repeating sort of mantra. I was about a couple years ago, I was out at my favorite spot, just out in the woods, and the phrase kept coming to me, and it was, "You are the sum of what you consume." And because many years right, and many years ago, at that point, and in my case, you were consuming, detrimental things to your health, bad food,
right,
alcohol, information that was not aligned with truth. So again, you're consuming all of this poison, and then eventually that I kept repeating that until I started to purge all that stuff from my life. And that was really the moment for me, like similar to yours, where some type of phrase that you just keep hearing in your mind just sort of keeps you on that path where you're just, exactly. And you're able to purge that completely from your psyche and your body.
That's awesome.
I like that. You're the sum of what you consume too, because in addition to that too, you can look at the again with the law of Gabo. When you look at the Gabo rune, which is the flow of energy versus the stagnation, is whatever you're consuming is going to be expelled and put back. It's the law of correspondence as well. And what's coming in must come out as well. So when you eat food, you pass that out. In addition, that this is the trivium. The information that you're taking in, you're processing that, like digesting it like food, and then what's put out is your behavior, your actions, your choices, and that's going to further create the reality that you're navigating. So, your diet, whether it be informational diet, energetic, all above, very, very, very important.
Go ahead, Greg. You look like you're about to say something.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Okay. So I think so. Oh, you got something, Logan? Sorry.
Yeah, I can expand on the plant teachers aspect as well.
Yeah, I would love to hear your perspective on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since you recently had a wonderful experience to reference back to. So I would love to hear that.
I sat with ayahuasca 2 times in Mexico. That was a incredibly profound experience. I mean, it was everything that I hoped for and well beyond in many ways. And one thing, in the context of what we're talking about here, and how that sort of kind of mirrors some aspects of some experiences that I've had with mushrooms as well. Both of those have an extremely potent quality to purge, especially like obviously with the ayahuasca, definitely you're purging like physically, and it's kind of like that's one of those correspondence things too, where like what's happening on the metaphysical is also happening in the physical. They're mirroring each other just as much as you're purging out the contents of your belly. You're purging out toxic, stagnant, emotional residue that has been in there. It's almost like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the feeling is so indescribable, honestly. It's such a liberating, it's almost like you had this thorn in your foot that you didn't even know was there until you pull it out, and then you're like, oh, that feels so much better. It's such a relief and a release. I'm sure there's a reason those 2 words are so similar, release and relief, because expression or depression due to suppression, relief comes from release. You're decompressing, you're letting that out, because energy has to flow somewhere. So imagine a garden hose that's got water coming in, you've pinched it off like this. That water's not just going to magically disappear. It's building pressure. You've got to let that out. And so, when you're dealing with trauma, especially, I mean, those emotions are so powerful energetically. You've got to figure out a way to purge that. And again, plant teachers, I agree with Brian. They're not an end all be all. Oh, you just take this and you'll feel better in the morning. That's the reason that so many people tend or have experienced what they call a bad trip. A bad trip, by the way, isn't anything to do with the medicine that they took. It's not like they got a bad batch of mushrooms or something. The bad trip is because they are resisting what that medicine is inducing.
Right.
So it's pulling to the surface, like you're cooking out impurities and it's all bubbling up, and then you're trying to fight it, going like, no. But in all my experience with psychedelics in general, the metaphor that I like to relate or refer to it as is when you take that into your body, you're symbolically asking a question. By taking it, you're asking a question to the plant teacher, to the universe, to yourself, and you better damn well be ready to accept that answer, because it's going to give it to you.
Yeah, that's great. No, I absolutely agree with that. Nice. So another, I think, great solution, and Greg, this is, I think, a great one for you to come in on, obviously, is, and especially for men, is, being able to get into like weightlifting or some kind of physical activity and training, getting yourself out of that, into your head, back into that body where these emotions are stored, stimulating that as a way of being able to use that as a healthy, form to process. So would you like to get into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I utilize it, especially when I'm experiencing some anger at moments, throughout the day. And I think it's been incredibly useful just because, you don't want to identify completely with the emotion itself. I think the other day somebody said, I am not anger, but I am expressing anger. The anger is that emotion that is coming through cosmically, and it's physically manifesting as an emotion. And what I need to do is I need to transmute it somehow into something positive. So my solution has always been, to take it out on the weights. And it's been pretty successful for me because, and I guess in light of recent events, and in fact, it actually happened the other day when we had a member of our, anarchist community get revealed and exposed. It made me really, really angry. And at that moment, I was like, okay, well, anything I'm thinking about right now is not going to be useful. So let me just hit up the gym, and I know that I'll feel better after that because I've released, the pent up anger that I'm needing to express in some form or fashion. I know that I'm not going to do it any other way that's going to be productive. So, let me put it towards something productive. And that's essentially what I've been doing, especially with that physical outlet in the gym, and to do it in such a way where it's purposeful and you're not just going there because it's satisfying that intention only. You're going there to have some other aspects, and basically, not just because you enjoy it, but because there's other purposes to it. It makes you feel good, but there's an end goal for it, and it's not just to go in there and look good and stand in front of the mirror and feed your ego. It's to it's to build on something. It's to strengthen. It's all of that.
So bringing a holistic approach to it, I think, is a great way to, you're looking at there. That's a great way to put it.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's definitely something that, even over the last couple of months, I've been starting to work with a new type of ritual where, I've been incorporating like going, for long runs, but also incorporating that with working with the runes. And kind of using them as a cadence. And I found that's been extremely helpful. I've been wanting to do some deep emotional purging, specifically in context of working with some of this trauma, as I've been thinking, this is something I've been delving into over the last few months really deeply. So I've been working with like the log goose room in context of that to really stimulate that. Because I think if you're bringing that power, that the runes are powerful in and of themselves, but if you're incorporating the physical aspect into it as well, I think it can, it's very, I've been experiencing very interesting results, to say the least. And I think you've also found that incorporating the whole breath and things like that into your routine has helped you. Sorry, waiting for my connection here.
Yeah. Good.
But yeah, would you like to talk about, maybe some of the effects energy work has had on some of your training, Greg?
Yeah, I tell you, you touched on that, and it's been incredible from when you first introduced me to it. When I first started out, actually, and it's interesting because the first time I did it was just eye-opening, and I couldn't believe how much energy I got from, starting out with the circle, and of course, working the Ul breath for, 20 minutes that I was doing it. And once I got into the activity, it's almost like you're completely enclosed by, like after you work the circle, you're completely engulfed. And so you're almost, you become one with the weights entirely. And you completely are in this, imagination phase where you are at one with, the activity. You feel connected, and you couple that with the music and how that sort of, entices a little bit more emotion out of you. And you're incorporating this, chant that I was doing. I mean, it when it's all sort of combined together. Did he leave us? Okay.
Yeah, I guess he'll probably pop back in here in just a second.
Yeah. No, but anyway, I was just saying that when you can incorporate the music and you can incorporate the chants and all the energy work together, it can be an incredible experience when all this is tied together, because, you're taking something like music that I'm very in touch with and can really impact what I'm doing, the physical aspects of what I'm doing. And, it's heightens my sensitivity. So I'm hearing the music come through, and it's making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. So I'm already in awe of, what's coming through, and audibly. So like, it can be incredible for someone who is looking for that extra experience, that is really sort of bored in the gym and just wants to kind of make things interesting. And it's incredible when you can incorporate all these aspects.
And it seems like the simple way to put that is that it's essentially hyper cultivating hyper presence within. And so it's like it's super visceral experience. Everything is just kind of heightened.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I don't feel like when I come into the gym and start the work. Prior to that, I just feel like, oh, here we go. I've entered another another domain. But then when you start to get into the work, you don't know where the doors end and where they begin, because you're having that visceral experience, and you're in tune to something that is taking you away from that physical space, from that moment.
Right. Right. And while we're on the topic, obviously, so anyone listening here, if you're interested in learning the techniques that we're talking about, we are offering what we call the toolbox. It's a free video series. All you have to do, there's a link in the description for the, to sign up for the initiation package. And that comes with our 3-part toolbox series that teaches you to cast the circle of the Magi. It teaches you the Hul breath, and then the how to chant the runes. And so, this is no joke, seriously. Like you will start, Greg, you said yourself, you will see instant, results when you start incorporating this.
Absolutely.
Whatever your daily routine is. And it doesn't have to be, weightlifting. It can be before you play an instrument or write your blog or whatever you happen to be doing, that day or whatever, even going to work or something. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there because, like this is a free package. There's really no reason not to just, access these amazing tools. But
yeah, and I also want to mention something really interesting about that, because the first, I think it was the second time I came in and did it, and I remember Brian saying, "Look, you gotta do the close down too, and you got to do everything from beginning to end, and make sure you create the circle." And once I casted the circle and did the ritual, I walked into a different section of the gym, and I turned off the lights.
Okay.
And for some reason that sort of put a different, I don't know, it heightened everything, but it also put me in a different environment. And I felt like, at that moment, it felt colder in the gym, which I wanted it to be colder.
Mm-hmm.
And as I walked up to the window, there was, obviously that was a couple months ago. So it was still cold outside, and I was looking outside, and it had just snowed, and none of the branches, or actually none of the leaves were on the branches, and I could see where there was a little bit of fog from me breathing on the window. So I thought, oh, this looks interesting, and I just unknowingly drew the strength rune, and I didn't know that was the strength rune.
Uruz?
But Uruz, and I basically drew it right there on the fogged up window. not knowing that it was the strength rune until I looked back at it later on.
I bet that was the ancestors just like giving you a little.
And that's the thing is, like, I haven't told Brian about that, but wow.
No, that's amazing, dude.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. So yeah, there's a good chance that those were that was ancestor influenced right there.
And then there was a couple. Okay, Brian has informed me his internet went down, so he's trying to get back in. We're just going to keep on, keep on rocking here.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, you made a couple of really interesting points I wanted to touch on there. So you were talking about the anger is not you. That's such a really important thing to know, whether it's you're dealing with depression or whatever. It's easy to confuse your sickness with you. I mean, think of like your cancer is in your body. It's not a part of you. It's an invader. It's a foreign energy that doesn't belong there. And those, I mean, it's not like, okay, I can see how this is kind of conflicting with what I said earlier about your, relating to your emotions and being, they're a part of you, in that just think of your brain as like a radio, and you're picking up different signals, right? So, these emotions are just energetic frequencies that you're sort of tuning into, but that are coming through for a very specific reason. Like I said, they're an indicator that something is amiss when you're experiencing a negative emotion. So think of your consciousness as the sky, and an emotion or a thought is like a cloud passing through. You don't confuse the cloud for the sky. You know that that's not the sky, that's a cloud, and that it's not going to be there. Like, it's going to keep on going. And then, you could also think of it like, on that analogy, think of a storm. A storm is kind of very symbolic of negative emotions, but what do storms do? They express, and that's how they actually get released. A rain cloud that's full of water, it's going to express that water, and then it dissipates, and then it clears up, and then you get sunshine again. But what would happen to the cloud if it was like hanging on to the water? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting because we have to understand that these are temporary. Any type of emotion that is coming into our experience is just that. It's something that is only there for a little bit. We are not defined by it, and we know that living in that moment where maybe there's a little bit of self-doubt in that we think we're going to feel like this forever, because when you're depressed, you do feel like that is, going to be your experience from today till the end of time. And, right. And we understand that once we come out of it and we sort of look back at it, I mean, I tend to look back at it, as a lesson, but sometimes it's refreshing to look back at it and think, I'm glad that the people that were around me at the time were telling me that, yes, this is temporary, but it's also right now you have to stay present with it, and you have to not, you have to ignore the conventional advice that you get from, at least the clinical opinions or people that have not experienced this type of negative, this type of depression, that they'll tell you, oh, it's, you're going to be okay tomorrow. Everything's fine. Right. You'll snap out of it. But
right.
Somebody that is related to you that's gone through it has to express the reality of the situation so that you can process it a little more. And I think I processed it better because people were telling me, hey, you're going to be in the muck. You're going to be in the, under the swamp for a little while, and you're going to be sinking, but you're not going to go completely under. Right. So it's that, of course, I'm, looking at the metaphor from Neverending Story, the horse goes under, but eventually there's still part of you that's, you got your hand up there and you're still inching and inching and inching, and you just need some little experience or something that kind of that takes you back out of that.
Right.
And that could be anything. It could be, another person that helps you through it, or your own experience or your own growth pattern outside of that. So again, I think those, those things could be key in sort of breaking you out of that funk, as we call it.
Right. And then, like you said, when you're looking back, I mean, to take it back to the storm cloud analogy again, what is, we kind of always recognize that the rain is like the negative, the sadness or whatever, rain, go away. But what does the rain do but nourish and feed, life, and then you could even say, when the lightning strikes and it's pure chaos and it causes a fire, that fire spreads and scorches the earth, and then therefore the land is fertile,
right.
Much more growth will come out of that. So it's like, it's when things get the most crazy and chaotic and seemingly, hellish, you're going to actually gain the most benefits from that.
Right. And I think of a lot of people's experiences when they come out of it with an understanding of, well, I can either go back to it or I can learn something from it. And I think the people that do, usually more often than not, the awakening follows it because you have two choices at that point, two roads, right. And two roads to take. So all that toolbox that now you eventually have, can get you back on track. And it's interesting because I think a lot of men experience this feeling because, again, like we go back to, feeling sort of less than in society, or they feel disempowered for many reasons. But I think a lot of it has to do with relationships as well. If they're not fulfilled in some type of relationship, or it could be related to the relationship itself. So there's so many different aspects that are suppressing the male archetype, the hero, from being the hero. And especially when we rescue the damsel in distress, which the hero wants, right? The hero wants to rescue the lady that is in distress. So when you realize that you can't rescue her, she's the one who is going through what she's going through because of her experiences, not from your lack of, help for her or guidance on your side. That
Right.
she is. I think a lot of men are affected by that, and that they can't be the rescuer always. And
Well,
that
it's
could,
like, are they externalizing that and going after some sort of thing outside themselves when the damsel in distress is actually the sacred feminine within their own selves?
right.
And the reason she's in distress is because the masculine is not protecting her. See,
Exactly.
that's the beauty of that story. That's why it's so popular and prevalent in so many different stories.
Yeah.
Is that she's in distress because she's without the masculine archetype of the protector and the wielding the sword of truth. But then he's going after her because he needs her just as much.
Right. And that's the thing when there's a balance.
And they live happily ever after.
yeah. In most stories.
So another aspect that we wanted to sort of look at here is something that sort of ties back to last week's episode, because there's a lot of this that comes from the dynamic of the parenting from a young age, and that's naturally going to manifest itself with a lot of anger, rage, and resentment towards our parents. I know for me personally, I definitely can attest to that. And so and that is a really big component of healing. I know for a fact that, and it's something I'm still working on. It's a slow process, but I'm very intentionally putting effort towards that. But do you all have anything you want to jump in on that topic for?
Yeah. So for me personally, like I said, as we were talking about earlier before our connection went out, ritual and energy work is probably one of my most useful tools. Being able to especially stay with using like a 9-world rune reading. If I have a certain question on something, I can do that, and I can really look at what, with very conscious intention, start to work with that. And I found that that's a really helpful tool to access it, for the fact that it allows you to get into the subconscious and the unconscious mind, where a lot of this rage and anger may be, because it's easy to consciously think about it and say like, okay, so they didn't know any better, or they just, that was normal or whatever. That doesn't necessarily fix all the anger or the hurt that you may have really deep down in there. So you need some kind of tool to really be able to help you dig down into that. And for me, ritual and energy work, breath work, things like that are probably some of the things that have helped me most personally.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's at some point, because like you said, consciously you're not actually going into the level where the trauma is. It's not in your logical, rational brain. It's below the surface in the emotional realm.
Right.
Definitely.
So what else do you think that we could do to specifically on the topic of healing the damaged bonds between us and our parents? Because that is really such a unique connection. And it can be so difficult too, because sometimes we become adults and they're still the same person, and you're trying to relate to them, you're trying to work within that headspace of repairing and connecting deeper, and they're still in their same kind of blockages and blind spots and sort of habitual behaviors and things like that, rejections. And so it can be really difficult navigating that, because you're trying to do that for you. And I mean, that can be a powerful lesson in itself, of learning patience, acceptance, forgiveness, despite what they're doing. That's the thing about forgiveness. You don't necessarily do it for them. You have to do it for yourself, because the only other option is holding on to that resentment, and it's literally like keeping poison inside of you. It's insane to do. It's so hard to let go of, but it's so much harder to keep it in.
Right. No, I guess what I was thinking about this is how to deal with um, healing the relationship with parents. I think that, that's a deep one there, because, you have a level that you could look at it that say maybe you bring these things, try to communicate them in a conscious manner, and provide, whatever information that's there. And that could go, potentially really good if the parents are willing to look at themselves and give some acknowledgement, and things like that. I think that could be very helpful. But I think more often than not, even we may encounter a situation where our parents may be even kind of hesitant or resistant to that information, because it'll mean that, like, as a parent, they'd have to admit that they did something that really very clearly hurt their child, and that's something that no parent wants to do to their no parent in their right mind anyway wants to do to their child. So that could be something that could be for them very hard to face. So for us, recognizing that that's probably a good process for them to be able to come to terms with it, and not necessarily expecting that expectation of getting that immediate acknowledgement of that wrongdoing that we might be seeking after.
Right.
I think that's something that kind of came up for me there.
No, that's on point. I've experienced that as well, because it's like you, for your own, so undergoing those traumas, you sort of didn't have a voice. You lost your voice. And so by expressing this to parents about, like, this affected me, this hurt me, you're not doing it to try to make them feel like shit. You're not trying to do it to hurt them back, but you need to say it. You need to have it at least acknowledged, or spoken for yourself. If they acknowledge it, that's great, but don't be attached to that outcome. But I think there's some healing in simply being able to express that to them, so that they can at least hear you.
Right.
Maybe they don't listen, but they heard you, and you said it.
Right. Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it.
Right on. So I think our last point is essentially, so what, this idea of toxic masculinity, we talked about is simply a result of wounded masculinity, which means it has been disconnected from the sacred feminine. So this can be a great way to heal, is finding ways to get yourself back in touch with your femininity, your feminine energy, in ways like, music, expressing yourself that way, writing, or maybe like gardening or something like that, because, you think about when you're growing a plant, what does that require? You're nurturing it, you're caring for it, that very kind of maternal, motherly energy. Do you want to share your story about how growing plants kind of got you reconnected with that care, that nurture?
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'd love to. So, yeah, as I said before, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was a very, very angry, very rage-filled, hate-filled person. Had a lot of things going, and I was so disconnected from my emotions that, I would actually get very enraged when I saw other people express them. So I started growing cannabis, and it wasn't even the using of the cannabis that really gave me a lot of joy. It was the simple fact of growing the plants. And it's because as I just sat there and I watched these beautiful little plants grow, a really big thing happened for me, and it's that I realized I had the potential to help create and nurture life. And that I wasn't only here to destroy things. And that was something that was really big for me, because for a lot of my life, I thought that, that was my only talent, that all I knew was this fucking rage. And I thought that that's the only thing I'd be good at, is destruction. And coming to a point where I could see that I had something other than that to offer, and that I could experience. It was a really, really beautiful moment for me. Obviously that in my life, that's when I really started picking up gardening, of all sorts. But, it's just those couple, those simple little plants, and taking care of them and nurturing them and watching them grow, that I got, something that powerful from it, that, carried with me since then, for sure.
Absolutely. And isn't it ironic that plants are green in color, which mimic the heart frequency of that heart rate, that care, once again, in the chakra system specifically. If anyone's not sure what I'm talking about, that's the heart center there. So yeah, that's an awesome story, and I think very, very profound, really.
Thank you.
So yeah, so you can look at how just expressing yourself in different ways, whether it's painting, music, gardening, something that's creating something. That's what
Right.
you're really getting at there. Is you have the amazing ability to create when the Bible says we're creating God's image. I think that's kind of what it's getting at, is that we're mini creators in this reality field, and whatever we create in our mind, as the principle of mentalism corresponds to the cosmic divine principle of mentalism, we on a micro level also create our own little mini universes within this shared reality.
Right.
And so that can be an extremely healing process all on its own, just tapping into that. Because think about this, we're so scared of feeling our emotions, right? As men, and what the way that we're brainwashed and gaslighted into feeling that way. What's an aspect of creation that comes with the fear of rejection, right? So tapping into that, there's healing in that by not being afraid to create something, not worried about whether it's good or not, but just whether it brings you joy. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Jimi Hendrix picked up the guitar the first day and he fucking sucked at it, right? Every master that ever picked up a guitar, they sucked ass at it, and people went, "Oh God, that sounds terrible." But guess what? They kept doing it because it brought them joy. They connect. They were tapping into something deeper, and then they kept going. And then we all, saw where what happened with that. So, just think about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
Yeah, and I usually would get a lot of that creative. Yeah, I guess the creative juices that came out of creating Anarchy Lifting, and specifically the logo and the artwork surrounding that. I mean, that was a moment where the image just sort of appears in your mind, and then at that moment I'm like, well, I can't let it escape now. So when I created it, I thought, that's pretty cool, and that that aspect of creating something that's your own, that you had a hand in, and especially when you see it manifest into something that's manifested for me into now, it's been incredibly profound for me to see the results of it, just based off a little bit of artwork that spurred into something bigger and more creative too.
Right. Obviously,
yeah,
Brian and I can relate to that in our creative.
Yeah, with your music, yeah.
Well, the Wizard Factory as well. The logo, all the artwork, and everything like that.
Yeah, it's
a creative process. It's been a lot of fun.
And guess what? Coming back to that, what I talked about earlier, being in touch with your Orlog, with your divine purpose. You're not here to destroy shit. You're here to create, because heaven on earth is a creation, not a destruction. And you're in touch with your divine path, you're going to tap into that feminine creative energy,
right?
And come alive through it. I mean, Brian and I, we do our brainstorming sessions all the time on video chats, and that's when we're most creative. And other ideas that are unrelated, because we're in that flow. Think about the word flow, feminine, just the flow of energy.
That's right.
Once we get into that state, it's just like, it's amazing, and it's such an exhilarating and satisfying experience every single time too.
Yeah.
So really, to tie this all together, the last point that we wanted to leave you with is essentially the importance of spreading awareness about not only the traumas that are so readily normalized in our society, that most people really don't think twice about, including myself up until just a few years ago. I'd never even really, looked at it that way before. And when I did, it was shocking. I'm like, oh, like, how did I think this was okay? Not only that though, but also normalizing the solutions as well, and making those seem not outlandish, make them seem relatable and accessible to anyone, because they really are. Just that there's so much stigma around things like, oh, getting in touch with your feminine side and stuff like that. Just, like, dude, it I don't know. It's about shifting your mindset, but also, we can do that by being an example to other people, by speaking about these things as if they're just totally normal and that they're almost weird for being weird about it. Your reverse psychology with their herd mentality, by thinking, oh, like maybe that is kind of weird, and then they want to fit in with what you're projecting instead. So I mean, anyway, like, just bottom line, spreading awareness about this kind of thing is really important, I think, because what has become normal is going to just stay the status quo until somebody decides to challenge it. And that's each person's responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, to say, like, what are we doing? This is not right. We need to steer a different direction from here, because we're already seeing all the tragic ramifications of this trajectory here. So
yeah, I agree.
So I think that's going to wrap up our episode this week. This was part 2 of 2. So as always, we're available for our services of the Arts of Self-Gnosis, whether it's an astrology reading, rune reading, or personal counseling. Also, definitely check out our free initiation package. It's absolutely free. All you have to do is check out the link below, and you get the free video series, and again, get those tools that you can start using today. And just, go be a skeptic about it and see. And I guarantee you try it out, and you'll be surprised. So of course, as always, it's a pleasure, and we'll see you next week on another episode. But until then, be empowered, inspired, and encouraged. Have a good night.